Hello, hello.
Monica, it's great to see you. I've been seeing you for a long time.
I'm back, Madam Chairwoman.
Okay, we are live. Good evening. Welcome to the special virtual joint committee meeting of the LEWY, Labor, Education, Workforce, and Youth, and Operations Management Government Accountability. I will read my text. We are all set. We'll stream today the meeting at 6 on HPA-TV, Comcast, and Frontier Government Channels 96 and 6032. It will also be streamed via hpatv.org, the HPA TV Facebook page, and HPA TV's Roku TV, Apple TV, and Amazon TV apps. It will also be broadcast and made available on the HPA-TV YouTube channel. So tonight, as I said, we have a special virtual joint committee meeting. Presently, I see my colleagues. I have Assistant Majority Leader Hernandez. I see Majority Leader Kelly Bilodeau. I see Councilman John Gale and myself. Let's see, what does that give me in okay, that gives me three in OMB. I'm going to make a slight change to the agenda, Superintendent and CFO Richard. We have a 2.4. She's getting on a plane and she has been gracious enough to call in right before she gets on. So we are going to take 2.4 as our first agenda item, and then we will do 2.1, the Hartford Public Schools fiscal year financial update. I appreciate everyone bearing with me while we make that slight change. The other folks we have on the call are our city treasurer. We have Jay Red. We have Corporation Counsel Harding. We have Julian Freund. We have Leanne Rawls and Debbie Zimmerman Hertz. Uh, I think, oh, and I see Kate Torres who will be coming on at 2.3. So the first item will be Mayor Aru Lamplam with an accompanying resolution confirming the appointment of Michelle Parada to be a member of the City of Hartford's Pension Commission. Her letter and resume are attached. Um, I always say, and I say this to every single person, and I've said this today to Ms. Parada, that we appreciate people who will take the time, effort, energy to give to the city of Hartford and serve in a capacity that is very important. I will open it up to my colleagues for questions, and then well, actually, let's hear from Ms. Parada on why she would like to be on the City of Hartford's Pension Commission. Ms. Parada?
Thank you so much, Madam Chairwoman. Thank you to the committee, all the leaders, for giving me the opportunity to speak earlier than I was set on the agenda. So I do appreciate it. I am standing here in JFK, so I'm doing the best I can. Happy to answer any questions. I know that you've received my resume. I hope you have. I have been a resident of Hartford for most of my life. I'm a fifth generation. We have 5 generations of Paradas in Hartford. My children are the 5th. We've lived in Hartford 90% of the time. I went to the bachelor school, then South Catholic, and happy to serve. I have been on the Democratic Town Committee, as many of you may know, and am active as well. I have a background of 40 years in real estate law and finance. I was a political science major and a double major with finance at Simmons College, and specialized in law school on the Property and Finance Journal. So I am fairly comfortable with the subject matter and happy to take any questions.
And I will open that up for my colleagues. Councilman Gale, Councilman Hernandez, Councilman Bildu. Do we have any questions? If we have no questions, I would then, because we're an efficient group and Ms. Parada is so qualified, I would then open it up for a motion to send back favorably.
Madam Chair, I'm not asking any questions because I know Ms. Prada well. And as a result of that, I'm very happy to make a motion to send her her appointment back to the full council with a favorable recommendation.
And do we have a second?
I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Superintendent, may I ask you a favor? Thank you, Ms. Parada. You are.
May I thank you, and I thank you, Councilman Gale. Appreciate the kind words.
Thank you very much, and you're free to go. Superintendent, I'm going to put you on the spot. Do you mind? And CFO Richard, we have Kate Torres with us here. I have her down at the end of the agenda. If we can move her appointment as long as smoothly as we did Ms. Parada's, do you mind if we go ahead with Kate?
Worries.
Okay, so let's do that, and then we will go to your presentation. So we have agenda item now 2.3. This is an appointment from Treasurer Sierra with accompanying resolution appointing Kate Torres to the Internal Audit Commission. Again, you were also emailed an updated resume earlier, and there's a letter. As I said, thank you for serving and wanting to serve. I will now let you speak a little bit to why you want to do it, a little bit about yourself, and then we'll open it up for questions.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. I am originally from Nevada, but I moved to Connecticut earlier last year, and I have been very happy with staying in Connecticut. I work in the city of Hartford, so I'm very familiar with the inner workings of the government here. I am an attorney, so I do commercial real estate and financing, as well as leasing and business organizations as my primary area of focus and practice. I have been involved in a lot of different public service organizations throughout my undergraduate career, my law school career, and I would like to serve as the audit commission member for the city of Hartford, specifically because I'm very passionate about giving back to my community. And because I've made Connecticut my place of residence, I really want to give back in that way as well.
Thank you, Ms. Torres. I will now open it up for my colleagues for questions.
Yes, Madam Chair.
Yes, Councilman Gale.
Yeah, and welcome, Ms. Torres. And like you, I'm also an attorney. So happy to have another attorney stepping forward to take this. And while you're not filling, I think you are filling the position of another attorney whose term has expired. And this Internal Audit Commission has had lots of attorneys over the years. Council's appointment to the Internal Audit Commission was a lawyer from Day Pitney, a firm I'm sure you're now aware of. and that was Ted C. was our appointment for 12 years to the commission. So I don't know if you've had an opportunity to watch any of the proceedings of the commission or get involved with it. It's a very important commission, and glad to see you step forward. Over the years, the Internal Audit Commission has done some pretty good work at helping us be a better city by finding ways in which different departments could be better, specifically better at handling money from time to time, which often gets us into trouble that we don't want and don't need. So we're counting on you, to put that burden on your shoulders. We're counting on you to make sure that you keep the city pointed in the right direction, and we know you will. So thank you, Madam Chair. I have no other comments.
Thank you. No pressure, Ms. Torres, Attorney Torres. My colleagues, Councilman Hernandez, Bildu, any questions? If there are none, do I have a motion to send this back favorably?
I'll move to send this back favorably to council.
I second.
Second, thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, oppose. Okay, motion passes. Thank you very much, Ms. Torres. And we also, as we say, you're welcome to stay on, but you certainly don't have to. That then brings us to our original, thank you, Superintendent, for indulging us, the first item, 2.1, Hartford Public Schools fiscal year 25-26 financial update. And I know Councilman Hernandez has a opening statement that he would like to speak to.
Yeah. So before we start the presentation, I wanted to talk a little bit about how we came about doing this. So we've first of all, thank you to the superintendent, Dr. Townsend, and the chief financial officer, Katie Richard, for coming tonight to update the city council and the public on the current year financial state. So I think there was a little bit of inspiration there, given the latest developments, when it comes to the conversation of school district. And this is not just Hartford, this is just throughout the whole state. We hear publicly on the news and everywhere, school districts trying to figure out, okay, what is the next step? The state, that's the hot topic at the state capitol. But in the case of Hartford, I think that I'll read this statement, that I want to make sure that people hear clearly, and it's the sentiment that we share here in council. So lately, much has been said publicly about the financial condition of Hartford Public Schools. As with nearly every public report, whether it's through social media or corporate media, opportunities for misinformation are vast and real. And I've heard everything. I've heard truths and not truths and misinformation. I've heard everything from one end to the other. So again, thank you for coming, because this is an opportunity for us to have a conversation and start with where we need to start, right? This year. Let's talk about this year. Let's see where we are, and then let's kind of start building on this conversation. So as council members, we believe that our city's greatest strength is its people. And at the heart of that strength are our students, our educators, and the families who believe in a brighter tomorrow. We believe that when a community comes together, when leaders, teachers, families, and neighbors work side by side, anything is possible. So together, we know we can build more than strong schools. We can build pathways to opportunity, hope, and lifelong success. Hartford City Council is proud to continue strengthening our partnership with the school district as we work together to support the success, safety, and well-being of every student and family in our community. We recognize that strong schools are the heart of a strong city. By collaborating closely with district leadership, educators, families, and community partners, we are committed to ensuring that our students learn in environments that are safe, well-resourced, and filled with opportunity. We are grateful for the dedication of our educators, the leadership of the school district who's present here tonight, and the involvement of parents and community members. By continuing to work as partners, we can build a brighter future for all students and ensure that our city remains a place where every child can thrive. Let today serve as an additional step forward in bringing up or bridging up our partnership on behalf of our children. Together we are stronger, and together we will continue to deliver for our community. So that statement is just a sentiment that collectively, we feel, and I want to be very clear about that statement, because a lot has been said. There's a lot of noise. There's a lot of misinformation, and this is what council has decided to do, to make sure that we start, creating a new path on the conversation with the school system, to figure out, okay, what are the next steps? How can we support you? How can we collaborate? How can we partner together? And it's all about our students. It's not about you, Dr. Thompson. It's not about you, Caitlin, who, as of yesterday, you are the best CFO of New England, apparently. Um, it's an inside joke. So I didn't take offense to it. I'm second. I'm second. I'm fine with that. But either way, it's about our students, right? And we want to make sure that this conversation that we're going to have in the next few minutes, it's based on our students, and it's founded on our children. It's not about any of us. So I hope that that's the foundation for this conversation. So I look forward to hearing a nice, good presentation. We may ask some questions at the end, and then we'll just take it from there. Is that good? Thank you. All right, Dr. Townsend and CFO Richard, the floor is yours.
Thank you. I'll frame it, and then I'll pass it to the best CFO in all of New England. So long story short, ladies and gentlemen, I'm a superintendent of Hartford Public Schools. I started August 2025. I had about 4 different reports up on my desk. I understand coming into this opportunity, there have been budget challenges spanning the past decade. So I knew this year would be just as challenging. One thing I saw immediately walking in after researching all of the reports, reading it, putting our team together to execute the recommendations, 64 plus, we noticed we still had need in the district. So unfortunately, fiscal year 2026, this current year that we're in now, we found that, although a budget has been passed, there was still a deficit because there were some things we still had to do by law that was not taken into account. And I think it was, possibly an error, but in good faith, trying to balance the budget, trying to do the cuts. I think something was amiss, but we did make it right, but it contributes to a deficit. Specifically, what I'm talking about when I was visiting all of our schools, I stopped at one school in particular where a young person was having challenges. And after speaking with the principal, I learned that that young person needed a paraprofessional. However, it wasn't budgeted for, so we didn't have the opportunity to hire for it. So I went back to our team and said, listen, we have to do what is right for kids and get that young person the support needed. And we found that we needed about 60 paraprofessionals across the district. So in good faith and working for young people and families, we did that. But unfortunately, that contributed to the deficit we're in now. Long story short, after all reports and all recommendations, still, the most we could ever save in cuts were about $400,000. So we said, listen, I think it's important to still look and do a feasibility study on the district to see if we're as effective and as efficient as possible. But we have a concern that's going to plague us for a long time, and it's the structure of our district and how we receive revenue and how our expenditures go. So working collaboratively with leaders at the city, leaders at the state, we're addressing ways to fix the structure over time while looking for some real-time solutions today. So the challenge is definitely heavy, but here's the good news. In Hartford Public Schools and Hartford City as a whole, I think I can speak and say, we don't wish it was easier. We just wish we're all better, trying to figure out with all the wisdom, all the thinking to do what's good for young people and fix the structure of the system once and for all, so our better days can remain in front of us. So with that, I will park my bus. I'll shift it over to our CFO, Caitlin Richard, to give an executive summary and go over the details of Hartford Public Schools fiscal 2026 budget.
Thank you, and good evening, everyone. There's been a lot of buildup to me being the best CFO, so I hope you enjoy this presentation. But yes, and I appreciate just the note on collaboration as well. So I'm going to get into some of the details of what the superintendent just framed. So for the current fiscal year, so this is the year we're in that ends at the end of June, we are facing a deficit. It's about $22 million total, and I'm going to break that down into what the specific drivers are. And there'll be a slide on each of these pieces. But to give you the summary, one challenge we are facing is declining enrollment. Enrollment is about 1,400 fewer students than we had last year. The reason that matters for the budget is that some of our revenue sources are tied to enrollment. So specifically the Magnet Operating Grant, which we get for our magnet schools, and our Alliance Grant are both related to the number of students that we have. So that enrollment decline has been a challenge. It's been a challenge for the past decade, but particularly this year, and I'll show you some data related to that. The second piece that is driving the deficit is about our staffing rates. And so What happens when we do the budget is we assume a certain number of vacant positions. I will also share more data on this, but we experienced a huge decrease in our vacancy rate from last year to this year. So last year, our vacancy rate was about 13%. So that means of all the roles that we have, 13% of them were not filled, and we're down to 3% this year. So it's actually exciting overall. It means we are filling positions. Those are teachers in front of kids. A lot of them are special education teachers. However, we did assume a 6% vacancy rate in the budget. So we assumed we'd go from 13 to 6, which was still a pretty big decline, but it's actually closer to 3. And so that does impact the budget, and I'll give some framing around that when we get to that slide. But vacancies is something that Hartford has really struggled with. We're no longer struggling with it, which is a really good thing, but it does have implications for the budget. The third piece is about the paraprofessionals. This is what the superintendent mentioned about student individualized education plans. Those are special education plans for students. We are legally mandated to provide the services in those, and we had to add about 60 positions. The next piece is tuition rates, and I'm going to have a whole slide on this breaking down for you what our tuition budget looks like. I think this is one of the things that has been being talked about. It is one of the biggest drivers of our budget and the deficits that we've faced over time. So I'll explain a bit more about what that means. But the tuition that we pay to other school operators when students leave the system, we're seeing rates rise even more than we expected. The last piece is something called the excess cost grant. This is funding we get when student services for special education cost 4.5 times the average for a student. So students' services have to cost more than $100,000 to qualify for this state grant. And what we're seeing is actually that the rates of tuition and transportation for special education are rising statewide. And so the pool is not enough to cover all of the costs. So we're actually seeing a decrease in the amount of special education grant funding through the excess cost grant from the state than we had in the prior year. So all of that together, I'm going to go over each point on the next slides, but all of that is what is driving that $22 million deficit. And of course, when we do questions, if there's anything in particular about any of this you want to know, we have even more information, but I'm trying just to hit the highlights. So this slide, what it shows is the past decade or so of enrollment in Hartford Public Schools. You can see it is decreasing over time, but I do want to note that this most recent year was the biggest decrease that we've experienced. So it's going from about 16,500 students to 15,200 students. So that's a significant decrease. A lot of districts across the country are experiencing enrollment decline. A lot of them have had challenges in this current year, largely related to immigration concerns. Ours, though, is deeper than that. It's also related to students choosing to go to other schools outside of Hartford, and part of the Sheff versus O'Neill settlement, which is opening additional seats for students to go to choice schools, to magnet schools, etc. So we can talk more about that, but one of the challenges we're facing is this enrollment decline. And as I shared, it ties to some of our revenue. So certain funding is per pupil, and so we miss out on that funding when we have fewer students. Turning now to vacancies, and like I said, it's overall good news for the district and for students, and then it is something that we need to figure out in the budget as a result. What you see here is some of our vacancy data. The specifics of each teacher role is less important than just the overall numbers of seeing that last year, we had 13% of our teacher positions were vacant. At the start of this year, we were down to 4%, and actually by September, that was closer to 3%. So when I share that, I mean, of all the teacher roles, if you had 100 teacher roles, 13 of them were empty last year. Now we're down to just 3 of them being empty. The row I highlighted is special education, and I really wanted to show that we have the same exact number of special education teacher roles last year compared to this year, but we have a lot fewer vacancies. One of the reasons for that is, one, we had historic teacher raises going into this year, really designed to recruit more teachers. We're now on par with some of the suburban and surrounding districts, and we had a specific focus on special education. This was one of the pieces that came out of the audit from CSDE, the inquiry into our special education, and they said you have to decrease that vacancy rate. We had 1 in 4 classrooms for special education not filled with a certified teacher, and we've been able to decrease that to about 9%. So this is an overall success. We're headed in the right direction. This vacancy rate is even lower than it was before COVID. However, it means that now people are making more, we're filling more roles, so it has a budget impact. And that is something we really need to be thinking about going into future years. I'll say I think a lot of what was happening in Hartford's budget previously is that because there were so many vacancies, it could make up for some of the deficits in other areas, so things like tuition or transportation, but it's just no longer the case. So we're glad we're filling the roles, but it does have financial implications. I'll turn now to the special ed paraeducator. So that piece was actually, we had a set of roles. We just did not think we would be able to fill them all to that degree. The special ed paraeducators is actually a newly identified need during the school year. So this was something, as Dr. Townsell said, came up during the school year, largely related to actually new students registering. So while we have enrollment decline, we also have enrollment mobility. So oftentimes we do have new students coming to the district while we also have other students leaving. And we had about 285 special education students who registered. They were new to the district. And 60 of those had adult support paraeducation on their individualized education plan. So that was something that we needed to adhere to. They were coming to us in a lot of cases with that already built in from a prior school system. And so that was that need to increase the number of positions to meet those legally mandated services. Across the past two slides, you can see a theme. Special education is a really big part of the service we provide to students. It's actually about a third of our whole budget when you include what we pay for students who both attend our schools and don't. And we've had this increase in staffing for special education to meet the needs of those students. So both certified teachers and also these para-educators who work one-on-one with students. I'm going to talk about tuition, and then I will shift to kind of what does this mean? What do we do next, et cetera. Because all of this, while it's about this year, does kind of tee up the conversation for next year and future years. So this slide I just want to share about tuition. I think that this is something that is a huge part of our budget, and it works. It's very complicated, the ways in which it works. So special education tuition, it's been rising at about 8% every year. And there's actually been fewer students receiving services over the past decade. So we've actually been decreasing the number of students in the private special education outplacements, but the cost of those services per student has been rising. I'll talk in the next couple of slides of what we could do at the state level to fix that. But just to size it for you, last year our total tuition budget was about $115 million. Of that, $18 million is general education tuition. That is the tuition we pay when a Hartford resident attends a non-Hartford magnet school. That is largely correct. So it's about $4,000 a student, and we had about 4,300 students. So it's a piece of the puzzle, but the much bigger piece is the special education tuition. That was about $97 million in the budget last year. And this is for Hartford residents who attend a few different types of schools. So one is when they go to a non-Hartford magnet school. Again, that's like CREC. That was about $25 million last year, about $22,000 per student. I will name as well that we're part of that process. So when a student in a non-Hartford magnet school needs special education services, we run that meeting for their individualized education plan to determine the services and then pay for them. Open choice schools, so that's when a student elects to go to a suburban district when they are a Hartford resident, also cost about $25 million. It was for a smaller number of students, so it's about $44,000 per student in those open choice districts. And I'll name we're actually not part of the process when that happens. So a student, if they choose to go to a suburban district, that district determines the services for the student, and then we pay for it. They also can outplace students, so they can decide that that student needs more support and needs to go to a private special education facility. So that district can decide that. And then we are also paying for that, which is about another $5 million. And then finally, so you have magnet schools, open choice schools, and then you have private placement. So this is when a student has been determined by the district that we are unable to meet their needs. Their needs are really high, and they need to go to a specialized school for their particular disability. So that's about $40 million for 300-ish students, so about $130,000 per student. And what I want people to take from this is one, a bit of how it works, but more importantly, how big a part of the budget this is, and that the rates go up every year, and we get different rates from every different provider. So different schools charge us different amounts, different private providers charge us different amounts, and it is all over the place right now. And in so many ways, there are some things we can do, but we have very limited control over this portion of our budget. So wanted to share that on tuition. One of the drivers of this year's budget is tuition being a bit higher than we thought, but I think it's really important for everyone in the public to understand that this is a huge component of our budget. In terms of next steps, and then we will open it up for questions. So just in terms of immediate next steps, we are continuing to work with the city, so I really appreciate the opportunity to do this. I also work directly with the city finance team. I think Julian is tired of me, but we talk about this. We talk about next year's budget just to get more ideas and collaboration on that front. We are also seeking support from the state, and I'll talk a bit about the priorities on the next slide, both for next year, but also for this year, knowing that a lot of this is structural challenges. Throughout this year, we have also implemented a process for any of our flexible non-salary dollars, so meaning not people, but any other expenses that are in our general fund that we would deem flexible. We have paused those. We do have a lot of grant funds that we still need to spend because those are, if we spend it, then we get the money from the state and federal government, but anything in our general fund. And we've also been scrutinizing any of the hires during the school year. Again, if it's a special education teacher, if it's a paraeducator, if it's a teacher that has a class of students, we have to hire it, but there's some roles that are not as close to students as that. And what I'll say is all of this we're taking into account in the budget for next year. And so one of the next things that we'll do as City Council in April is sharing our budget for next year. And we're baking all of this into it. We're saying, okay, what do we think this means for enrollment, for our vacancies? So enrollment's going to be, lower than what we thought. Vacancies are going to be lower than what we thought. Special education costs are likely higher than we thought. So as we talk about the deficit for next year, it's inclusive of us including everything we're learning from this year. So I'll say, for example, as we build the budget for next year, we're assuming that lower enrollment number, which means schools are planning to have fewer staff next year, just because so many of our ratios are dependent on the number of students. And finally, this is a bit bigger picture, but I do want to connect it to what we're doing longer term, because as we mentioned, a lot of these are bigger issues. So some things that we can do. One is that, as the superintendent mentioned, we'll be doing a feasibility study to analyze resource use across our schools to see if there's more opportunities for efficiency. And something we're really excited about is we are planning to expand our in-house special education programming. So identifying some of the programming we're really strong at, building more of those programs so that we don't have to outplace as many students. And really that helps keep students close to home, and it decreases costs. Our vision actually is that we can become a destination at some point where other districts can send their students because we're offering programming, and that provides us an opportunity to charge tuition. So similar to the experience we're in, but reversing that dynamic and really building out programming within Hartford. What the state can do, and these are some of the priorities that we have, and this is something we've been aligned on with the city, with the mayor has been really supportive around these priorities. The first one is around the education cost sharing formula. That is how we are funded at the state level per pupil. There is legislation right now to adjust that for inflation, so to increase the amount of that per pupil funding every year as costs rise. There's also a proposal to phase out general education tuition, so that $18 million that we pay. We are also advocating to fund the SEED special education grant, that is funding for special education students in the district. And we are advocating for the legislature to set rates for that tuition. So as I mentioned, it's all over the place right now. It rises every year. And that is something they're planning to do not next year, but the year after. The final priority we have at the state level is that when students engage in the open choice system, you saw in that tuition piece that costs are about twice as high as when they go to magnet schools. And so we only get half of the state funding. So we're asking for full funding for those students to support the costs. And we are asking that the state cover the costs of the specialized transportation. So right now, the state covers the cost for just regular transportation for students in the choice system, but if they need specialized curb-to-curb transportation, they don't. So those are three priorities at the state level. This is where the problem lies. It is structural, it is related to special education, it's related to the school choice system, and that is what we are advocating for. And we are also, in terms of what the city can do, just the continued collaboration like we're doing today is incredibly helpful. And in part of our itemized list of expenditures that we'll be bringing, we will ask for some city support in our budget to support with the overall structural issue, while we also collaborate together on fixing the structure at the state level so we can get to a place of having sustainable budgets and being able to serve the students who attend our schools. I will pause there. I know that was a lot of information, and yeah, open to any questions that folks have.
Madam Chair, I'll kick us off with some questions. I almost guarantee that Councilman Gill will have some questions too. Yes, he does, but I'm gonna start. I'm gonna kick us off. So can you go back to the tuition slide? I want to ask a question, but also make a statement about the tuition one. So
Yeah.
Okay, there you go. Okay. So just for the public, I mean, I know some of the answers to some of the questions that I'm going to ask, but my intent on calling for this joint meeting was for also the public to also get some of the information that sometimes is hard for the public to understand unless we actually clearly specify it. So when people see that in the non-HPS magnet school for the special education, there's, we're paying $22,000 per student. The other one is $44,000. The other one is $130,000. Can you tell the public how much it is that HPS receives in funding, regardless if it's a state, city, funding as a whole, per student?
Yes. So, and thanks for asking that. I should add that to the slide. And we'll plan to put that in our budget book so it's clear. So for those categories, when a student attends a non-Hartford magnet school, we get the full ECS funding for that student. So that's the base of $11,525 with any weights if the student has, if they live in poverty or a multilingual learner. So we get the full funding for the non-Hartford magnet schools. For the open choice, and we don't get any federal funding for those students, that goes to the district where they're attending. For the open choice schools, we get half of the ECS funding for those students. So half of that $11,525 is what we receive. And then for the students who are privately placed, we get the full ECS funding. So overall, we get full ECS funding, the per pupil funding, the $11,525 plus any weights. For non-Hartford magnet schools and private placement, we get half for open choice. And we actually get none if a student goes to a charter school, just to add that.
So in essence, for the public, in essence, like the point that I was trying to make with that question is that you only get a fraction of what you're paying for these students under these circumstances.
Correct.
And special education, it's the one where you're going to see in any district, not just Hartford. This is where you're going to see the biggest gap between what you receive per student and the cost per student. So that's why special education is such a huge component of the conversation at the legislative session, but it is also the biggest factor in any deficit for any school district at this point. So that's why I wanted to go back to here, so people understand that this is a huge issue.
Yes, and actually Connecticut is one of 2 states in the whole country that doesn't have a weight for special education in its funding formula. So when I mentioned there's additional funding if a student's in poverty or a multilingual learner, there's no weight if they are special education. And that's often the biggest weight in state funding formulas because those are the students with the greatest needs. So I'm glad you said that, and it's part of why that's such a challenge.
And now that you mentioned that, I do want to also tell the public, there is no proposal right now on the floor, whether it's the House or the Senate, that speaks to a weight for special education that I know of. I mean, at least not SB 7 or 5002 either. I don't think either one has a weight for special education.
It doesn't. I will say that the SEED grant, which is the grant that was introduced last year, is equivalent to a 50% weight for special education, which is what we would want to see in ECS, but they only funded it 19% this year. Okay. So out of the 16 million that would give us, we got about 3 million.
Now, can you also, I'm going to open a scenario and then you give me an example, because I have plenty from New Haven, but you tell me from Hartford.
Yeah.
The reasonable cost, that language on this on the state law that says that other operators or other districts can charge the sending district of special education students reasonable cost. That language kills me, right? Can you explain what that means to a school district that's sending so many students to the districts? Like, give me an example of what that looked like. Because I could give you one that's not reasonable at all, but they're still under the umbrella of reasonable.
Yeah, it means so many different things to different people, right? To your point, because what does reasonable mean? I mean, we have certain students that cost more than $500,000 a year for their services. And it, to your point, it's so many different providers, both in terms of the private providers, the suburban districts. We are part of the process when it's a non-Hartford magnet school. But right now it's really, we do a huge verification process. I will add that. We verify that students are Hartford residents, and then we have folks that verify that they are receiving the services and that those services are in their individualized education plan. But if they are in the plan and they're receiving them, a lot of different interpretations of what is reasonable. And so, yeah.
I was surprised when you said that Hartford Public Schools does not participate in the IEP meetings or the PBT meetings for on some of these categories. Can you explain that? Because I was under the impression there is no law or any policy that says that impedes you from being part of those meetings. Can you explain? Because that is a big issue.
Let me,
That
oh, yeah.
HPS that there's no representation from HPS at the table when
And
these conversations are happening, when in fact we're the ones paying.
yes. And so let me clarify that because, and it's also about who is leading the meeting and who owns that individualized education plan. So we own and lead the meeting when a student goes to a non-Hartford magnet school, so to CREC. We also are responsible if we are actually determining that they need to be in a private placement. It's the open choice meetings where we are invited to attend. We do so when we can. It is about 600 students. And so between the other meetings that we attend for the non-Hartford magnet schools for our own students, that can be difficult administratively. But the key is that we don't run the meeting or own the individualized education plan. So when we do attend and we prioritize the ones that we do not have any type of say in it. We're there to listen, we can provide input, but the ultimate determination is from the suburban district. And actually there was a proposal by CSDE in this legislative session to switch that and say that the district who is owning that process should also pay. And so they were going to switch actually to have Hartford be responsible for both determining the services and paying for them. So there is a recognition, at least at the state level, that there's a gap if it's not the same district who is leading the process and paying for the services. But it is yet to be determined the outcome of that.
Thank you. Thank you. Can you move on to the next slide on the last one, and I'll probably stop at that last question. Yes. So I don't know if you mentioned this, but on the state side of it, I know that you talked about the adjust for inflation to the ECS, which is what HB 5002 has on that proposal. But I think more importantly than the inflation, which is important to have, is the actual increase of the foundational amount. And I don't know if you mentioned it, and if you did, I'm sorry, I didn't catch it. I think more important than the inflation is the foundational amount needs to change from 11,525 to another amount. And obviously I'm advocating to the 16,000 that the School and State Finance Project is also advocating. I feel like that is the right number to have. I know that that's unrealistic under this particular ecosystem at the state right now. But an increase to the foundational amount, it's more impactful at this point to every district in the state, as opposed to the inflation. But the inflation is also important. Both should go together. The foundation and the inflation.
Yes, exactly. Because if that foundation amount goes up, then actually the inflation proposals, it just goes up every year. So as costs go up, then the amount goes up.
Correct.
Yeah.
Because just adjusting for inflation right now, it's not going to catch us up. It's not going to catch us up. We're always going to be like chasing our tail. And it needs to be adjusted for the foundational, and then inflation should be applied to it thereafter. And that's just my opinion, but it is something that you should consider as part of your ask.
Yeah. No.
And I know that we have asked that, when we went to the state, both Hartford and New Haven. I know we did ask for the same things, but I wanted for the public to understand that there's two different components to ECS here. So thank you. If another questions come up, I'll raise my hand, but I'll open up the floor now for any of my other council colleagues.
Can I ask a quick question, Councilman?
Yep, yep, go ahead.
Sort of off track a little bit, but I think it might be useful if anybody's listening. CFO Richard, can you explain what I heard you say the other day about if enrollment is down, why does it? Because I thought that was a really important thing to hear. Can you explain that? Do you
Yes, and I
mind,
can.
Councilman Hernandez, just to add that to the conversation?
Yeah, no, I'm happy to. And I can
Okay.
bring the slides back up later if we need them. So this is, I think, a question we get a lot is, well, if enrollment's going down, why don't your costs go down to the same degree? What I will say is one piece is that over the past decade, so when you've seen that enrollment decline, Hartford has cut about $200 million from the budget in the past decade, about 600 positions. So there have been cuts happening. But part of the struggle is that when enrollment decline happens, if you had all students leave from one school, you could close that school, but the enrollment decline happens across the district. And what needs to happen is that you would need to have enough students leave from a particular school at a particular grade level to no longer need a teacher there. And sometimes that is true. So in next year's process, as we do this, as we have the declining enrollment, there are some teaching positions we won't need, but it is not one-to-one because the enrollment decline is so widespread across the district. And so when that enrollment declines, when you lose revenue, when you then pay more for students going out, it is not one-to-one with what you can save by trimming certain positions where it makes sense. Because all of our staffing goes based on formulas, based on enrollments at every grade level and the class size maximums. And so you don't realize you often need a similar number of teachers as you had before for those students who are still in that school.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
I'm fine.
Councilman Gale.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Ms. Richard, for the presentation. Couple of, I have quite a few questions actually, but let's see. Sticking with your last slide, where what could we do? What could the state do? Have you put if everything that you were asking the state to do, if they did it all, have you put a dollar figure on that as to how much of your $22 million problem right now that would solve?
Yeah, we've put a dollar figure to it as we look into next year. It would be $70 million more for us for next year. Our deficit right now is closer to 50. And so actually, if you add all of that up, it would fully solve the problem. And actually for next year would mean a surplus. And that would be if all of those 3 points were hit in the way that we're advocating for them.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but Councilman Gale asked about also the 22 million for this year. Most of these proposals will not take effect this year, so I want to make sure that we
Yes.
address this year, which was his question, because I don't think that any of these will help this year because they wouldn't take effect for this fiscal year.
Yeah, these are priorities we're advocating for in the current legislative session. So thank you for that clarification. It would not help this year's deficit. It would entirely solve next year's and leave us with a surplus for next year.
Have there then been discussions about filling the gap, about the legislature filling the gap for this year?
There have been discussions. There's no determinations yet, but that is something we are looking into and making an ask around.
Well, we here at council wish you tremendous success with that. You can be assured. And clearly, and I say that, this part I say without jest, if there is anything that you believe council can be helpful in any way in discussing this with not only our Hartford delegation, but anybody else, we're certainly happy to jump in, as Chair Hernandez said at the very beginning. I mean, this is our school system. These are our kids. This is our future. We're all very much tied into it. Now, you talked in answer to a question from Councilwoman Rossetti. She asked the question, well, if enrollment goes down, why don't costs go down? And you talked a little bit about that. And in that discussion, you mentioned that, well, if they all went down in one school, you could close that school. A lot of what we also hear as council members from the public is, gee, Hartford Public Schools have so many schools and so many buildings. They have a problem. Why don't they just close those schools? And you know, we're confronted with this all the time, as I'm sure you know. And so the question I have is to what extent in all of the analysis and research that has been ongoing, where is the board with respect to analyzing the need for buildings, and probably more importantly, or equally as important, I suppose, is what kind of significant or insignificant cost savings would come out of that, if you know. And I just think just kind of bringing us up to speed as to where people are would be helpful in this conversation.
Yeah, I can bring you up to speed with where we're at. One piece is that we are going to be doing a feasibility study that looks at some of this, but we've done some of our own research. And what I'll say about the closing schools question is we have 39 schools. Of that, 21 are magnet schools. And so that is a particular status with the state under Sheff versus O'Neill. That would be a more complicated process. The other 18 schools are neighborhood schools. So actually at the high school level, we have 11 high schools. 8 of them are magnet schools. 3 are neighborhood schools. Part of what actually I've seen in school closures, so this was work I did previously as a consultant. I closed schools in the last district I was in. It doesn't save as much money as you think. Maybe $500,000 per school. The reason for that is that those students who are attending that school still need to go somewhere. So one, it either becomes more students leaving the district, or those students will go to a nearby school, and you largely need the same number of teaching staff. So oftentimes the teaching staff, the support staff move with those students. You save a little bit on the principal, the assistant principal, but you can actually increase costs related to transportation because now those students are going further. So we are going to be doing a deeper study, but from what we've looked at, one, you have the magnet neighborhood piece, and then with the neighborhood schools, you often just don't save as much as you would think per school. So we haven't seen it as a major way to solve this structural challenge. If it's about, $500,000 per school, it is something we're looking at in the feasibility study from a student experience lens. So is it better for students to be in a larger school where they have more extracurricular activities? Is that worth the community toll of closing a school? But there's national research now that it's not a money saver in the way that you would think it is. So we're going to be exploring it more in the feasibility study, but aren't viewing it as a major lever in the deficit solving.
And so I'm getting the impression, just to put something specific on it, that even if Hartford had closed 4 schools this year, the savings would not have come close to closing your $22 million budget gap.
Correct.
All right, thank you. Thank you for that. Now, going back to the special ed discussion and the in the slide you showed that there was one group of 310 students for which where average spending is $130,000 per student. Now, and I apologize, I'm on Main Street and there are these motorcycles.
Weathersfield has them too right now, so I also have been drowning that out.
Well, all right, I guess they left you and they've just come by me now.
No, and I'm in City Hall. I hear the same thing as you, John.
Really?
So.
It's like they must be.
Well, they passed me now, so they're yours. So on that, but I also heard you say that Hartford had to spend 4.5 times or roughly 100,000 per student before the state kicked in. So explain, if you would, what is that? On the one hand, you're saying we only have to spend 100,000 per student, but what you're telling us is we're really spending 130,000 per student.
Yes. And these are actually, you've nailed it, because that's the group of students where we qualify for excess cost, but we only get the cost above the $100,000. So we have to pay everything up to $100,000, and then anything in excess of that, so about the $30,000 per student, is covered by the state. And then the state only funds that grant at about 75%. And so that sounds complicated, but what happened, we get about 12 million at the end of the day from the state for excess cost, where they only pay above 100,000. And then of that sum total, they cap it around 75%, just saying that's all the money that they have to cover it. So we only get, about a little more than a quarter of those expenses covered through the state grant.
So, but that still then works out to be, I guess I'm a little confused. After the receipt of state funding, we're still spending 130,000 per student?
That's just what we're spending. And then the state covers maybe about 30,000 per student, but that's just the total expense. And then that is shared by what we spend out of our general budget and then what is covered by that state grant.
Again, I'm a little confused, and sorry for being thick here. If the state covers 30,000, is our real expense then just 100,000, or does that kid
Yes,
actually
you could look at it that way. Yep,
Okay.
100,000 out of our general funds. Yep.
Okay, all right.
Yep.
And I believe you said we also get 11,500 for that student.
Yes.
But that means we are spending close to 90,000 for each of these 310 students.
Exactly.
And you also mentioned that a rather large number of special ed students, well, I don't know if it's a large number year over year, but it sounded like a large number to me, of 285 students, special ed students increase.
Yes.
Came to Hartford this year. While overall you lost 1,000 students, you gained 300 of the most costly students. And so I'm wondering, you did mention that you do an audit to ensure that the students live in Hartford. These 285 special ed students, I take it that you confirmed that they all truly live in Hartford. Do we know whether there's an incentive to move into Hartford just to take advantage of special ed? Did these all come from another school district and are now moving here because somehow they think it's going to be a better educational experience, or is this just the luck of the draw?
I don't know enough to answer that, actually. Like, we could look at the data to see where students came from. So I'm not sure, but we can look into it. I will say that, to what you're saying, although enrollment has declined, the level of need has increased in Hartford. So those students who are remaining or who are coming tend to have higher needs than some of the ones that are leaving. And so I don't have an answer to that question, but we can look into it.
Yeah, it just does seem a little odd that at a time when we're losing students, the only people who are moving into Hartford are people that have children with special needs. Anyway.
Councilman Gale, let me, can I just pause for a second?
Yeah.
I want to know if just because I'm looking at the timing, because we have another, does Councilwoman Bilodeau or Councilman TJ Clark, do you guys have any questions? I just want to make sure that you have an opportunity before we get too deep into the time. All right.
No questions, Mr. Chair, but I just want to say thank you, CFO Richard, and to the superintendent for being here tonight and sharing this information with us.
All right. Council President, do you have anything?
Yes, Mr. Chair, thank you for the presentation, as well as CFO Richards for being on as well. A couple of things I just wanted to say. I'm not sure if this was said, but happy birthday to Dr. Townsend.
Yes, this is his birthday party right now.
Yeah.
I don't know if you all knew.
I'm quite sure he figures that he can spend his time elsewhere.
Thank you.
But just to which I know this has been talked about before. If you were to actually close consolidated schools, have you figured out what that dollar value would be and how that would add to the
like
budget?
$500,000-ish.
$500,000. Okay.
Per school. Yeah.
All right.
Councilman Gale, I just have one more question, but you could try finish up on your end, and then ask my last
I
one.
have just one more myself.
So you do one, and I do one, and then we're done.
So the last question I have is, you indicated we have 15,200 students in our system this year. How many students are there in Hartford, period, if you know? So 15.2 are in our system, but how many other students are there living in Hartford that are apparently going somewhere other than our system?
Yeah, there's 21,000 students and 9,000 of them are choosing to go elsewhere.
So 24,000?
Yep, sorry, 24. Yep, there's
Okay.
9,000 choosing to go elsewhere. No, actually it's because this is the key, sorry. So for the 15,000, 3,000 of those are suburban. So 12,000 are Hartford of our enrollment. And then if you add the 9,000 going elsewhere, that's the 21,000. So there's 21,000 students in Hartford, 9,000 go elsewhere, and then 3,000 suburban students choose to come to Hartford.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Thank you. So I'll ask one last question, but I would say that I'm looking forward to that analysis of closures of schools and and how much it will save, because my experience has been slightly different than yours, or than your analysis, your high level analysis of the 500,000. So I'm curious to see what you get, because I have a total different experience, which it will create some discrepancy between your number and my number. So I want to see exactly how your analysis comes out. I just did it, and my savings were quite more. But you're correct; it is not as much as people think. But it was quite more than the 500,000. But anyway, my last question is this one. $22 million for this year, projected for this year. You mentioned on your presentation that one of your mitigation strategies was to, and you didn't use this word, these are my words, but I forgot how you said it, that you froze some of those non-personnel flexible funding general funds at whatever point it is that you said, okay, let's put a stop to it in order to at least mitigate or at least stop the bleeding, for lack of another term. That's one mitigation strategy. My question here is, what other mitigation strategies have you put in place this year? Because I assume that as soon as the year started, and I know that Dr. Thompson just started, right at the beginning of it, but I'm sure that you started seeing some projections early on that were tracking where we are today. So I assume that early on, there were some conversations about, okay, what can we do of the things that we can control? And again, I understand this is systematic. I understand there's a lot of fixed costs that we cannot control. But the things that we can control, right, as little as they are or as big as they are, what other mitigation strategies have been put in place to at least alleviate the deficit? And or what can we do in the next 3 months that perhaps can yield something, right? And again, I'm not looking for anything big at this point, because I'm realistic to the situation. But I want the public to know, what have you done beyond just the freezing of the general funds?
Yeah, one thing I can share as superintendent, one thing we can control is the revenue with our students who enroll or choose Hartford Public Schools based off of what parents want for themselves. So we definitely have increased our advertising on social media, not through paid advertisement, but through organic advertisement, with sharing what we do well, hosting school expositions and showcasing what we do well. I know at the beginning of this year, we had the opportunity to go into a contract to earn our young people back by recruiting to expose our families to programs such as the Hartford Promise. Unfortunately, that has a little bit of barriers there, because it bumps into the chef settlement. So, our hands are tied all the way around. We can't recruit students, quote unquote, because it's going to violate the law. So we're kind of at the whim of letting the chips fall where they may, with our hands kind of tied behind our back. But we are looking into that. We are going to lean in and speak with Corporation Counsel to see what we can do to not make the state compromise. But the reality is, the best helping hands we will find are at the end of our own two arms. So showcasing what we do well. One thing I want to say, somebody said, well, what are people going back to Hartford Public Schools for? A couple of things. Number one, the Hartford Promise. Meaning if you live in a city, go to a Hartford Public School, have a 3.0 to 93% attendance rate, guaranteed up to $100,000 to a college of their choice across the country. No other district no other school system does that here in the state of Connecticut at that level, meaning $100,000. And additionally, an enhanced student experience. When we're seeing across the district with, for example, literacy scores, mathematics scores, our scores are up compared to this time last year. Additionally, our attendance chronic absenteeism is down compared to this time last year, while our daily attendance is up compared to this time last year. So what we're showing is that our educators are doing more with less, and our vacancies are at an all-time low right now in real time as well, too. In addition to our climate and culture of the work environment, we have the lowest amount of grievances we've had, I think, in probably a decade. I had our president of the Teacher Federation, Hartford Federation of Teachers, send me the data for the last 10 years. And last year, when I walked in, there was 78 grievances on my desk. Right now, in real time, by the grace of God, we're barely at 15. So, just a better overall program in general. And the word of mouth will spread and say, hey, we think that our better days are in front of us. So in real time, revenue that we try to control is to earn our young people back by recruiting them. But that comes with barriers because they're wagging their fingers, say you can't recruit your students, which is, I'm trying to figure out what that's about, because when I walk around, I see signs that say choose other school systems. So I feel like I should be able to do the exact same thing. So I'll park my bus on that.
I will add just the one other piece to your question on what we've done to mitigate. So yeah, the flexible general fund, but also just position reviews. So that is something we looked at earlier in the year. We looked at every single classroom and saw if there was enrollment down anywhere, did we need a teacher allocation? Like I said, in a lot of places, you still need a lot of the teacher allocations, but if there was a vacant teacher allocation and there wasn't enough students there to justify it, we didn't hire for that position. So that was one other thing we did, a staffing review to make sure that we're just hiring for the necessary roles. We did not do anything for the people already in place. We didn't want to disrupt the workforce in that way. And as you mentioned, a lot of the other things are out of our control. But in terms of staffing reviews, and then, as you mentioned, the flexible general fund non-salary.
Well, soon enough, this council body will have in front of us, difficult conversations and when it comes to the deficit of Hartford Public Schools, and I want to make sure that the public understands and knows that HPS has done everything possible to mitigate this deficit, and that's why I asked the question for you to tell the public what you've done, because the public deserves, to know exactly where the taxpayer dollars, are going to, and I want to make sure that we do our due diligence to inform the public that you have done your due diligence. So thank you for answering the question. And now, Madam Chair, I relinquish my chairman back to you.
Thank you very much. Thank you again, Superintendent. I have some virtual birthday cake for you. Here you go. Thank you, CFO Richard. And this is just the beginning of our ongoing productive conversations. And I see that Council President Clark has joined us, and that will then bring us to our next and final agenda item, which is 2.2, Mayor, and certainly Superintendent, CFO, feel free to leave. 2.2, Mayor Arulampulam with accompanying resolution authorizing the City of Hartford to enter into a lease agreement for the aforementioned equipment to seek out the appropriate financing terms for the city, with a public hearing on Monday, March 16th at 7 p.m. And I believe let's see, I believe our Director of Management and Budget, Julian, are you presenting on this with Mr. Red? Who from the city is going to present on that? Julian, is that you?
Well, we have a team here, so
Okay, team. I love a team.
CFO Rawls is on the line.
Oh, and then CFO Rawls. Yes,
City Treasurer is here, and Jay Red, one of the bond advisors, who can field a lot of the technical details related to the proposal. And I can kick it off, and then we can do.
Yep, the floor is you guys.
Okay. So I believe this item is actually both components based on the backup that was provided with the agenda. The first component being the proposed bond issuance for what are really core municipal infrastructure investments. That's a $25 million proposed bond issuance, and then the capital lease piece, which would provide $25 million of lease capacity for fire and public works equipment, and some IT infrastructure improvements. And so, given our status with the state and our current contract for financial assistance with the state, both of these items required not just city council approval, but had to go through a process for state approval from the Secretary of OPM and also the state treasurer. The Municipal Accountability Review Board reviewed both proposals at their March meeting, and they recommended to the Secretary and the state treasurer conditional approval of both items. And the conditions around that approval really amounted to things like limiting the bond issuance or the maturity period to no more than 20-year bonds, not using the bond proceeds for operating expenses, and really just sort of best practices of that nature. And then in addition to that, they also are asking to see our updated 5-year capital improvement plan, really as a reassurance that the city has looked at all of its capital infrastructure needs. And so we will be forwarding on that CIP. It's actually also in your budget document that you received on Monday, the FY27 Mayor's Recommended Budget. So as I mentioned, the GO bonds would fund core municipal projects. They're itemized in the bond ordinance. Just click through those. They would include, $10 million towards the city's milling and paving program, $2.5 million for road reconstruction projects at Eastview Street, Groton Street, and Essex Street, $2.5 million towards streetlight replacements, $2 million towards sidewalk repair and replacements, $4 million towards ongoing ADA compliance projects, and that is primarily sidewalk work and the installation of AD compliant ramps and the textured warning strips and the curbing around that and sort of adjacent infrastructure around those improvements. $1 million towards the Maple Ave streetscape, which includes improvements from Preston Street to South Street, sidewalks, lighting, trees, curbing, drainage improvements, and so forth. And then lastly, $3 million towards ongoing improvements to the city's stormwater pump stations. The equipment capital lease item very simply would be helping the city get closer to catching up on a lot of deferred replacements, primarily for fire and public works departments. You'll probably recall over the last several years at least that our ability to fund this heavy equipment replacement has been in the range of $2 to $3 million a year out of the operating budget, occasionally supplemented with $1 million or so here and there out of surplus. So this access to the $25 million would go a long way towards getting the city back on track and more timely replacements. And both of these proposals were built into the city's 5-year financial plan that was presented to the MARB last year around this time. So while the details had not been ironed out, the mayor did have on in his projections that you wanted to propose this. We built in some estimates for the debt service requirements into the 5-year plan, with the initial debt service payments appearing in fiscal year 2027, and then obviously continuing throughout that 5-year forecast period. Now, a year later, with the details in place and all the preparation and work that's gone into the proposal so far, now those projections have been built into the FY27 budget. And they will be incorporated into the updated 5-year plan for the MARB. And so that's kind of an overview of what's being proposed. I don't know who would like to go next. Jay may have some additional information to add on the technical piece and the marketing of the bonds and so forth.
Yeah, yes, please, Mr. Red, and certainly CFO.
Sure. Thank you. And good evening, everyone. I think Julian did a great job of laying out what the contemplated transactions are. The city has been gone through a period where they've used pay-as-you-go methodology for a number of years, but the contemplated projects, the price tags are just too high for pay-as-you-go. And it necessitates the city to come back to the capital markets under its own credit rating and to borrow to effectively address those capital improvement needs. It is not uncommon for cities like the city of Hartford, New Haven, and other cities to do that. The city's balance sheet is in very, very good shape, strong. The rainy day fund is healthy. The general fund balance is healthy. And a $25 million general obligation bond sale will not put any financial stress on the city at all with respect to its general fund and its ability to make the payments. Now, with that in mind, one thing we did do to mimic what the state treasurer's office does, we structured this transaction to have a 20-year maturity at level principal. So the obligation, the annual obligation for the city is very predictable and consistent. So from a budget perspective, the obligation will be known from the time the bonds are issued until the time the bonds retire in 20 years. Similarly, the master lease facility, typically in big city life, government, and finance, you have your police cruisers, your DPW, your fire departments, and things like that. Those departments use equipment that have a useful life to them, and at certain points they need to be replaced. And so years and years ago, the master lease came along as a way to finance those recurring needs instead of putting them on a general obligation bond sale, because you're going to cycle through those pieces of equipment in 3 years, 5 years, 7 years. So essentially, what these two transactions are doing is allowing the city, from a financial perspective, to operate like most other governments in the state of Connecticut and in the country, frankly, with respect to its balance sheet, utilizing that and addressing those needs that have gone unaddressed for a number of years while the city made its way through the MARB and used pay as you go. But now we're finally at a point where the balance sheet can withstand it, and it'll be beneficial to the city.
Thank you, Mr. Red.
Uh-huh.
CFO.
Good evening, everyone. I think between Jay and Julian, they summed it up really well. I would just like to note that the issuance of debt is a joint venture between the mayor's office and the treasurer's office. And Treasurer Sierra and her team have been instrumental in helping us get to this point as well.
Thank you, CFO. Thank you, Madam Treasurer. I would now, if we're done, open it up to my colleagues. Please raise your hand if you have questions. I'll start with Councilman Gale.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, team, for the presentation. Mr. Red, let me, I forget about it. Whoever can answer the question, answer the question.
Sure.
I already have my little 42-page line item budget in front of me, and I found right there on page 39 debt bond service entry of $2,500,000, broken down into principal of $1,250,000 and interest of $1,250,000. Is that this bond that we are talking about?
It is. It is an estimate. We wouldn't be able to finalize those numbers until we actually sold the bonds. So when Julian was putting together his budget, proposed budget and budget forecast, he has an assumed interest rate, I believe, Julian, correct me if I'm wrong, at 6%. And so you take the $25 million and you amortize it over 20 years at 6%, the numbers end up being very close to what you have in the budget report. But we say that those numbers will move around based on the market at the time of sale of the bonds. We're hoping for a lower cost of interest when we sell the bonds, but we won't know, but it's in that neighborhood.
So my little simple math brain tells me 20 years times 2.5 million is $50 million. And so we are going to ultimately spend $50 million to get 25 million today. Am I correct?
No, not necessarily. The debt service on a level principal structure decreases over time. It starts out a little higher and it decreases over time. But what the key component is the total debt service, more so than the annual debt service. If you're amortizing this $25 million at a 6% cost of funds, in year one, you got 6% interest on the whole 25. When some of that principal rolls off, you have 6% interest on the balance, and so on and so forth, all the way to year 20. So the real component is the total debt service. You're right, you're in the ballpark, back of the envelope, so to speak. But yes, to borrow $25 million, you're going to pay 10, 12, 13, $15 million in interest for sure.
Okay, yeah, because you mentioned it's designed to be a flat number every year, so that whatever the final number is, if it's 2 million or 2.5, whatever it is,
Right.
the design is for that to be flat for 20 years.
Right.
Yeah, and I do a lot of real estate transactions, and federal government requires every time you borrow money to purchase a home, the very first page of your closing disclosure shows you how much you're borrowing today, how much you're going to pay in interest over the 30 years, because most of these are 30-year loans.
That's right.
And, clients are often pretty shocked when they see that borrowing $200,000 today costs them a total of $400,000 over the 30 years.
Yes.
But I just want to make sure I'm understanding it so that I've got it in mind. So thank you for that.
Yep.
When we pass this bond ordinance, are we then fixed in spending for those very specific line items that are shown here? So, for instance, I think there's $1 million for Maple Avenue streetscapes. If we pass this bond issue as is, are we then bound? The city's then bound to spend that $1 million on Maple Avenue, or not spend it at all?
Yes, I think our presentation to the mob, we laid out the respective projects that will be funded through the bond sale. And so once the bonds are sold, those monies will be in an account. And then Julian and his staff, when it's time to address those projects and pay for those projects, will draw out of that fund to make those capital improvements take place. And so, yes, we outline what the proceeds are for, and then we use the proceeds for those projects.
So, it strikes me that, these are policy decisions. Somebody decided that $1 million for Maple Avenue had a higher priority than fixing something else in this town. And somebody decided that spending $4 million for...
Councilman, I believe that $1 million is a part of a bigger project. I think it finishes and I could be wrong. I didn't mean to interrupt you. Julian, can you speak to that?
Well, I was just going to ask what
I'm sorry.
I want to know the policy decision. I would like.
Yeah.
I want to know what is our policy decision.
Understand. I just had a little faint memory in my head. I don't remember many things, but that it was a part of something more, but I could be wrong. I am many times.
Julia, it's all yours if that's
Yes, you're remembering correctly that is sort of the last funding gap in a larger project that was funded with some state assistance, and I believe there was local funds in the initial phases of that project as well. A couple of the considerations that went into the choice of these projects were one, that the mayor really wanted to focus on core infrastructure, bread and butter municipal infrastructure projects. But another aspect of it is they had to be shovel ready or close to shovel ready, something that could be begun and completed within, I believe it's a 2-year period, to avoid any interest arbitrage restrictions, and
Right.
The treasurer and Jay can speak to that better than I could, but they had to be projects that were essentially ready to go right away.
Right. And just not to be too technical, it's what's commonly referred to the Internal Revenue Service spend down rules. And so once you issue debt for tax exempt purposes, the benefit of the public, and it goes into the fund, then Julian and his team have a certain amount of time to spend those monies on those respective projects. And that's part of the opinion that our bond counsel, Robinson and Cole, will offer at the closing of the bond sale. And that opinion simply says they have reviewed all necessary documents, they have reviewed the project list, they understand that the city intends to spend those monies on this list of projects, and they are okay with it. So it kind of keeps the city's feet to the fire with respect to what to do with those monies in a specific time frame.
And if I could add to that, Concom has worked with reviewing these projects, Councilman. Another reason why they review them so closely is because the projects involved in the offering can't generate any type of revenue. And if they do generate revenue, then it would change the structure of the offering and the type of bonds that we could sell.
Right.
So I'm kind of interested in what my, you know, what my role is, and whether I have a role. And here's my specific question on this: if we as a council were to decide that we really don't think it's important to spend $4 million for ADA compliance, can we pull that out and have this become a $21 million bond issue, just as an example?
Well, I think that's a policy issue and I don't work at the
we're the policy body, so
I'm not
we're
in the
supposed to be the
administration.
policy body.
I think that would be a discussion for the administration and council, but not
technically we could do it. Technically we could do it.
Right, but
technically I imagine that yes, you could do it, Councilman, but I would also state that these projects are projects that have been ignored, right, since 2018 due to our financial situation. So right now, the sidewalks are in rough shape. The streets are in rough shape. There's lots of complaints, right, that everyone is hearing about the condition of the roads and sidewalks. And improving that core infrastructure is beyond helpful to the residents and our students who are walking the streets every day. So I would say that there's, if you were to think of removing projects, to have a deep conversation with the mayor and Public Works to see why they chose the projects that are on this list.
Yeah, I would like them to have been here to discuss it, but we will. I will tell you, I feel exactly as you've just stated. I think there's lots of things that need to be done in this city. And I think that if I talk to my neighbors, they will all tell me, you should be spending the money on the roads and the sidewalks, not on ADA compliance. And I think, you know, that's the feedback that I will get. I'd be happy to move 4 million to roads to 14 million, but I guess we have to know that those are shovel ready, as you suggested.
But the ADA compliance is in reference to the sidewalks, right, and the crosswalks, and
yes,
and
but
having
let me just
to
mention
cross.
this to you since you bring it up. In my neighborhood, we have ADA compliant ramps at every single intersection in the neighborhood. What we don't have are sidewalks that you can get from point A to point B with any degree of alacrity. Whitney Street is just an absolute abysmal sidewalk, and anybody in a wheelchair trying to go up it is never going to make it. So they're never going to get to that ADA compliant ramp that we have. So there are some of these things that when I talk to people in my neighborhood, they scratch their heads and they say, you got to be kidding me. And then they went through and they took a whole bunch of ramps that existed. They took them out and replaced them with brand new ones that just had rubber. I mean, I get it. It's a better tread. That's great. But in the meantime, the sidewalks are falling apart. The sidewalks in front of people's homes and businesses are falling apart all over town. So, I mean, I'm, you know, to Mr. Red's point, it's a policy decision. I'm a policy body here as council, at least we're supposed to be. And so, you know, I want the ability to talk to my colleagues and say, hey, let's exercise some
I'd like-
policy and move
I'd like
some
to
money around.
add-
But anyway, you've answered the
I'd like to
question. We
add
can do
to-
it. I don't need us to get into whether
I'd
we
like
should
to
or
add
not.
to that. Can I add?
Yep. So
Yeah.
Councilman Gale, I believe the Madam Treasurer would like
Yeah,
to
go ahead.
add
I'm
to
sorry.
that.
Yep.
So, as a co-issue of bonds with the mayor works with the staff department heads to identify what's needed, which he did. My job is to make sure that the borrowing is responsible, the risk is controlled, and the taxpayers' resources are protected. So he did work with his department head to identify these key projects. And it does meet the requirement. So I see your point, but there's other, like the Hartford Park Trust Fund and other stuff that we could also talk about projects. So we right now looking for your support to move forward. And I know that CFO has have not been to the market, none of us, for 8 years, and this is her last year with us. So want to make sure we get this deal through.
Well, I appreciate that and appreciate everything that staff and the mayor does, but we're not potted plants here. We have input as to policy on these matters, and that's the only thing I wanted to just make sure is that we do that. But anyway, let me move on to another.
Councilman, do you recall when we went for the first time not the first time, from 8 years ago, we went out there to issue bonds? Were you were the council part of the process identifying projects or anything like that?
For all the time that I've been on this council, Madam Treasurer, the city of Hartford has not issued a single bond. So Councilman Clark and I are in our 11th year, and we've not passed a single budget that had any bond money in it. So we haven't
been in the market for 8 years, but okay.
We haven't been through that process.
Okay. Well, that's the process that I've seen since I've been around.
Yeah.
Yep. Nope.
And thank you, Madam Treasurer. That's a very good point. Councilman Gale, do you have another question? Because I know we still have Councilman Hernandez and
I mean, I'm happy to pass for a minute. I do have a number of not a number, but one question on the leasing aspect. This was on the bonds. I do have questions on the lease.
Yeah, let's see if we have, and then we'll know where we're at. Council President, do you have some questions for our esteemed colleagues?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through you, good evening, everyone. Just a quick question. The rundown for the debt repayment, what is that on an annual basis? I know Mr. Red talked about how it will be curving down over the course of the years, but what's the average roughly debt service payment?
Looking at the projected debt schedule, because as Jay mentioned earlier, we won't have final pricing until we go to market. Projected, the initial debt payments start around 2.5 million and they decrease every year. By the end of the 20-year issuance, the debt payment is around 1.3 million.
Thank you. And Madam CFO, I'm quite sure since this Councilman Gill had mentioned that this is referenced in the mayor's recommended budget for 26-27. I'm sure that you worked with the treasurer and Mr. Red to make sure that these debt service payments would be projected to be affordable to the city.
Correct. And I would add that Julian also built the thought of a bond sale into the 5-year projection for the 2026 budget. So you are seeing the results of a potential bond sale in the current year budget numbers with a 5-year projection related to the current year budget.
Great. Thank you, Julian. Didn't mean to leave you out of the finance equation. And so with that, and this is for the audience as well to better understand, in the event that the city has projected a certain number that it's going to pay, and once you go to the issuance of bonds, it is a lesser number, what's the next course of action for the administration if there's, let's say, some sort of savings from the sale?
So that would actually provide additional funding on the pay-go basis, because we're not stopping the pay-as-you-go for CIP or VET. We are just enhancing it with this one-time issuance. And I should add that this is the only issuance that the mayor intends to have in the projected future. There are no other planned issuances for debt. So the thought was to get caught up on the core infrastructure that is really lacking in the city.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. That is very good to know regarding that. And you mentioned that the mayor referenced that these are shovel-ready projects that he wanted to put out there. All in all, do you know, and this probably would be a better question either for Julian or the DPW director, since it's more heavy DPW, once the bond sale is issued, do you know when these projects would start?
Julian, I'm going to kick that one to you.
I think for a number of these, let me just get my list in front of me again. So for the items like the overlay, the sidewalk work, those are kind of ongoing projects that the city contracts out for an overlay contractor annually. And this really would just be, sort of ramping up the amount that we can contract for in a given year. So a number of these are really ongoing projects that the city does continuous investment into that sort of asset type year after year. The Maple Ave project, again, is a project that is, in a phase 2 or 3 type situation. The pumping stations, that's been an ongoing project. The city put several $1 million out of its ARPA award into the pump stations. So a lot of these are already in motion to a certain degree and ongoing.
Okay. I recognize too on the list there was something relative to a fire. Is that a new fire apparatus?
That's on the leasing.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's on the lease side?
Yes.
Okay, all right.
But yes, there is on the lease side around 12 million or so allocated towards fire equipment.
Any other equipment on there that's on the leasing side?
Yep, there's around 11 million for DPW equipment. 350 of their 392 vehicles are past their useful life. So they are in a desperate need for an influx of vehicles on that side. And then around $1.2 million for actual technology.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you, Madam Chair.
You are welcome. And before we get back to you, Councilman Gale, let me just make sure that Councilman Hernandez is either going to ask a question or he's all set, and then we can circle back and end up with you.
I'm all set, Madam Chair.
Okay, thank you very much. Councilman Gale.
Thank you. So turning to the lease part of this, I was able to find where the bond payment was in this budget, but I'm not able to find where the lease payments are. Can you direct me to where I would find that?
They would not appear in the FY27 budget based on what the likely timing of the purchases, the turnaround time for ordering, taking delivery, and being invoiced is that there won't be any payments due in FY27. So those are payments that we're projecting will appear in years 2 and beyond in our 5-year plan. I can give you a sense of what the projections look like for those.
Yeah, what would be in the FY28? What would be the line item for lease payments?
So again, a lot of this will be determined by the timing, what gets ordered in the first tranche of equipment. And as I'm sure you remember from conversations with both of those departments in prior budget workshops, that the delivery time on, especially with the fire apparatus, is upwards of 1 to 2 years, sometimes longer. So these are truly just projections, but we have $2.7 million built into the FY28 year for lease purchase repayments. and they go up each year as more equipment is ordered. So FY 29, it's estimated at 3.58 million. And then it peaks at 4.5 million in FY 2030. And these are the it was for the lease purchase items or the capital lease items that were using a 6% interest rate, which I am told was on the rather conservative side. But again, until we've ordered these and get all the details, that's what we're using.
And these lease payments would run for what term?
They depending on the specific piece of equipment, between 3 and 7 years.
Julie, can I just jump in for a second? Typically in a master lease, once the commercial bank that we select and negotiate with gets the order request, then the next step in that process is to determine which tranche that piece of equipment fits in. Is it a 3-year tranche, a 5-year tranche, a 7-year tranche? And based on which tranche it falls in, it will be on the balance sheet for that length of time, that period of time. So when Julian made the statement, it peaks at around $4 million. That's not for 20 years. That's for whenever that tranche, it rolls off once it's financed, and then that goes back to zero. So it's basically like a revolving, rolling type of financing mechanism. It's unlike the bond sale, that's a 20-year obligation. The master lease allows you short-term financing on recurring equipment needs.
And you wouldn't finance the equipment beyond their useful life.
That's exactly right.
I would also add, Councilman, that the master lease requires us to go out to RFP. So again, these are just projections, and we would have to see what the banks come back with for the actual terms of the financing.
Yeah, I'm just sort of back of the envelope here. If we're 2.7 million, then 3.5, then 4.5. If we're getting $25 million worth of equipment, I'm assuming we got to pay back at least $25 million plus some, maybe more like 35 or 40,000 with the interest. And so it sounds like this would be a 10 to 15 year obligation to get this $25 million worth of equipment. Am I in the right ballpark here?
No, not necessarily. I mean, again, the longest term will be 7 years. So so whatever piece of equipment fits into the 7-year tranche, that's the amortization period. It's not going to go out to 15. If we have it's in the 5-year, that's the amortization period, and similarly for the 3-year tranche as well. So it's either going to be 3, 5, or 7. And once you hit the term, that falls off the balance sheet. The city now takes title to that equipment. The city owns that equipment because it's paid for.
Okay. So, all right, let me just change direction a little bit. And this is a conversation that Leanne, you and I started a little bit the other day. And you mentioned that, so I'm going to ask you to show me where this fund is and where I would find it in our ordinances. One of the things that struck me in looking at these leases was that we at the city of Hartford aren't doing our budgeting in the same way that a typical condominium association does its budgeting. A typical condominium association will sit there and plan for the future by saying, okay, our roof is going to need to be replaced every 30 years, and our windows every 25, and our asphalt every 20. And so each year in our budget, we're going to set aside a certain amount of money called a reserve for replacement. That's going to go into a dedicated fund. And then when we need it, it will be there. And it certainly strikes me that from a budgeting perspective, the city of Hartford could do exactly the same thing. In fact, I'm kind of shocked that we're not. And I don't know what other municipalities do, but I would think that all over the country, many municipalities, if not all, would think about setting aside each year a designated sum for the replacement of vehicles, because you know you're going to have to replace them. And so as to not get into a situation as we find ourselves in now, we could have been setting aside each year pick a number. I mean, $5 million a year, but importantly, it would have to have been in a dedicated fund, because certainly what I've observed is when money isn't spent in the budget, it just goes back to the general fund. So it wouldn't be there to pay for that piece of fire equipment we need 7 years from now. Now, I think, Leanne, you said you thought we did have such a dedicated fund. So I guess I'm asking, where is it in our ordinances that we have this designated fund? Because I would want to know that we couldn't touch it. And I take it the answer is going to be we just haven't funded it over the years.
So I'm not sure if you would see it in the ordinances, but it is what we call a special revenue fund. And you would see it specifically laid out in the ACFR. You would not see it in the budget book other than the general fund contribution to the VET fund.
In here.
Yep, that's the budget. So Julian can show you where it's budgeted. The annual contribution to the VET fund is budgeted in that book. But if you wanted to see the actual results of the fund, then you would have to look to the ACFR in the special revenue fund section.
So is that information that Julian, you can provide? You can show us where you're calling it a VEC fund?
Yep, Vehicle Equipment and Technology. It's Fund 2022.
Okay. I mean, I don't need to see it right now, but I would like to see where it is. But I would also like to know very specifically whether there's an ordinance authorizing the creation of the fund such that it can't be touched.
Councilman, it's been a part of the budget.
Yeah, I would say this fund was created back in 2007, maybe 2008. It's an older fund. It's been around for a while.
If I may, Madam Chair, through you,
Please.
Councilman Gale, it's if you look at the past city budgets since our time on council, VET has been a part of the budget where that's allocation for vehicle equipment.
Well, I know there's a line item that says vehicle equipment. There's many line items that talk about vehicles.
Well, specifically for VET.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right. Well,
yeah, it's not anything new.
And you would see all purchases for equipment rolling through this fund.
So I'm looking at a fund that says vehicles and equipment lines. Well, I don't know what's the proper terminology here, but this year it's a $2.095 million line item.
It sounds like you are looking at the correct line. And then for FY27, it is 1 million. I don't have that schedule right in front of me. I was going to the book. But it is the fiscal year 26 amount was right there, just a shade over 2 million. So when you said 2,090,000, that sounds correct. I'm looking for a review.
And so that's the if this is indeed a dedicated fund, then that's the line item that we have underfunded over the last many years. And I can see, looking at it, going back historically, well, it looks like it was, I don't know, it's hard to say. There's one line for new leases and purchases, and that's the 2 million. And then this year it's 1 million, and the prior year it was almost 4 million.
Yeah, this fund was actually created, Councilman, back when the city entered into its first master lease agreement. So we matched the funding source with the purchases of equipment, and we coded all of the accounts in the fund so that the spend is recorded in our fixed assets inventory. So the system itself picks up the purchase of a fixed asset all through that fund.
So it sounds like we had the right idea in 2007. We just haven't haven't been able to appropriately fund it.
Well, it was funded by capital leases throughout the years, and then once the city went to pay-go in 2018 due to the rough financial condition we were in back then, yeah, that's when the funding started to decrease and things became a little difficult.
All right, thank you for that. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councilman. I believe there are no more questions. I really want to thank certainly, Julian, Leanne, Mr. Red, the treasurer's office. It takes a joint effort. I do want to say that I think the quote of the evening is "We are not potted plants," and I do like that. And I appreciate somebody who uses the word tranche. One of my favorite, very underutilized. But with that said, I am going to ask for a motion.
I am not prepared to send this back to council yet, Madam Chair. I would move to postpone it and keep it in committee because I personally would like to have a discussion about the policy of how we are going to spend this 25 million. I mean, we could end up falling exactly where the administration is, but I think it's worth us having some internal conversation. So I would like to postpone it in committee right now, and I so move.
Council President?
Since Councilman ordered I won't say ordered, but he made a motion, I'll second just for the sake of calling for the vote.
Okay, there is a motion to, are you saying postpone, Councilman Gale?
Keep it in committee, yes. Postpone it till the next, and we know this committee is going to be meeting very, very often, very, very soon.
Okay, so we're voting on that. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Opposed.
Nay.
Nay.
Motion fails.
Madam Chair,
Yes, Council President.
through you, I'd like to make the motion for a favorable recommendation back to council.
I second.
Okay. There is a motion for favorable with a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye, I'm opposed. Nay, whatever.
Motion passes to send it back with a favorable recommendation. With that being said, we have no further agenda items. I thank you all for your time and for your expertise, and have a good night. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Good
you.
night, everyone.